Okay. So I wanted to do some stuff that's a little bit quicker format than me just reading out lectures that I've already made. And I've been working today on something which I thought was worth reflecting on. So let's have a go at it. So the thing I wanted to talk about was the album American Capitalist by Five Finger Death Punch. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about actually was how there's like barely any mention of Five Finger Death Punch in metal studies. In fact, if I show you now, I think we're just going to have to keep it like this. Maybe maybe we can get away with that. Maybe we can get away with that. It's kind of in the middle of the screen, isn't it? Right. Okay. Let's put it up like that. So the interesting thing about Five Finger Death Punch is that when you go to metalstudies.org and you go to the bibliography, so here you can see we've got a big bibliography that searches that's got it's a huge collection and very well maintained. If you search Five Finger, you don't get any results. Maybe let's search finger and see. Maybe I'm. Oh, that's not looking good. Maybe if we search five, maybe let's be fair. No. No. I'm inclined to think. Let's be even fairer. Let's see if let's go in my library. Let's put some quotes around that. Are they mentioned anywhere? Okay, yeah, maybe they are. What do people say? Okay, yeah. We got a mention. Barely a mention. Okay, so Lewis mentions it, but barely. Over in here, they're saying maybe there's... Okay, let's see if we've got anything in here. In the Cambridge Companion to Metal Music, edited 2023, so this is contemporary. How does this look, by the way? Yeah, it's probably fine. Have we got anything from in this book? Okay, yeah, we've got one mention. A discussion about vocal technique. Okay, so I think that actually does settle my point a little bit. That people in metal studies don't talk about Five Finger Death Punch very much. Now, I wonder why this is, yeah? Now, a big issue in metal studies, generally, is that people don't like writing about bands that they don't like. So you tend to see people publishing about bands that they find interesting. Often, it's even more explicit than that. People write about bands that they think deserve to be included in scholarship. And Five Finger Death Punch don't come into this because they're not popular. This album is not critically acclaimed. The band are not critically acclaimed. In fact, they are derided. Often. I was able to... I'm working on this article at the moment. Where is it? I'm saying here, they're among the most commonly derided bands by metal scene participants. It is well known that they are disliked by scene people, by people who think they know better. Not necessarily your average metal fan. Now, let's talk about this. The name and the artwork, which I think are the really interesting things here, are that Five Finger Death Punch decided back in 2009, 2010, before this album came out in 2010, that they were going to break with convention, actually. And this is genuinely subversive by the standards of metal bands because it quite overtly shows that they are interested in making money, or that they or that they have made money. They are they are quite obviously talking about showing off their commerce. And this is very unusual in metal bands. Most of the time, money is something which is either not talked about or is kind of dealt with kind of bashfully. Sort of, oh yeah, well I guess we make money, but the music's more important. Obviously, the music is the main thing. Or maybe it's handled in a way where you talk a big game about making money, but actually you're just a scene band that sells a few t-shirts, and a lot of that is just you talking yourself into buying more shirts. Overt displays of interesting commerciality like this are really, really unusual. I can think of another example off the top of my head, which is Warrant, the glam metal band, and you might think again, all right, glam metal, that was a genre where the overt celebrations of excess were quite common. Showing off that you had money wasn't necessarily a bad thing, or was it? The way that Warrant go about displaying commercial success. They don't say it's their commercial success. Maybe they're talking about commercial success and they're implicated in that perhaps, and maybe this is a caricature of a label executive that they had perhaps. I don't know, there's all kinds of things that one could read into that. But but it's not celebratory in the way that this is. This is interesting. That it celebrates commercial success quite directly. And I think that actually it borrows quite obviously from tropes found in hip hop. I think of a sort of late 90s, early 2000s kind of sort of late gangster rap like 50 Cent. The immediate pre-Kanye turn towards greater emotionality in hip hop on a broad scale. This embodies that quite a lot. I think the comic book type aesthetics also play into that, and that's so that I think this is really interesting because it partly explains why people might not like them very much, and I think the lyrics too also speak to this. If I go back to looking at the lyrics for American Capitalist on Genius, which I was doing earlier. We've got some stuff where it's quite open and celebratory, and then the chorus perfectly articulates the experience of disavowal, of ideological disavowal. Basically saying, going through the process of denial, that you don't want to believe that all of this is hollow. You are reconciled to believing in it. The Zizek's articulation of disavowal is, I know very well that X is the case, but I know that I am participating in a hollow illusion, yet on the other hand, this is my very means of economic security and material safety and so on and so on. I know very well that I participate in a horrible, destructive charade, yet. And to express this quite directly, I think is interesting, and maybe even contributes to their reception as bad. Because on the one hand, they are just kind of being stupid and overtly celebrating things, which I think a lot of metal fans don't like. On the people in my kind of camp, left wing, more middle class, people who like to think they're doing the right things, Those people tend not to like Five Finger Death Punch very much. But on the other hand, maybe there's also something disturbing in the fact that they bring some humanity and ambiguity to this, even. Is that not interesting? That, there is a moment of reflection in the lyrics to this song. I'm not going to listen to the song, obviously. But I think that's just something that I wanted to meditate on. So it's an interesting case, right? Because there are bands that are doing things wrong on an aesthetic level, according to people who consider themselves knowledgeable about metal. And they're also on a level of the content. It's not just that they're doing some performative thing in a way that's unconventional. They're also pointing at some of the ideological sacred cows in metal, which include that you're not really meant to talk about money. Money is meant to be kind of exterior to metal. It's meant to be all about the music. This is a genre where one can slip away from the everyday concrete worries about finances, for instance. Whereas being a hip hop musician or maybe a punk musician, you're bound up in these concerns a lot of the time. You're thinking about either how to make money or how to escape this process of making money. Raves also kind of have some of this aspect, where you have to think about what kinds of extra legal behaviour you need to commit in order to have the rave actually take place. Metal is more all about the music, so the idea that you can leave finances at the door and not have to think about them, and certainly don't raise them on the level of your aesthetics, that is something that Five Finger Death Punch actually are subverting. Whether you like that, of course, is an entirely different question. But anyway, thanks.